Thank you, Sarah. And I'm going to switch things up a little bit and get out from behind the podium and move around a little bit. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today about the pork industry and how we are navigating some of our challenges and opportunities. Sarah gave a nice introduction of myself, but I just want to let you know a little bit more about me. I grew up on a farm by Truman, Minnesota, so southern Minnesota. We had dairy cows for a while, and then we had pigs and crops. I graduated from the University of Minnesota with a degree in animal science. And my first job was with the feed industry in sales. And lo and behold, along the way, I met this really nice farmer, fell in love with him and married him. And 34 years later, almost 34 years later, we continue to farm on his family's farm. We have 3 adult kids, and today our farm is 2,000 head of finishing, so you can see our barns there. We also have about 450 acres of crops. As Sarah said, I still have my job with Alltech in a sales support role. I always felt that was a really nice advantage to be able to see the ag industry from as a farmer and also allied industry. So for those of you that aren't familiar with NPPC, we are a voluntarily funded trade association. I have our mission statement up here, and I'm not going to read it to you, but I think there's a couple things that I want you to take note of. First of all, when we talk about sustainability, we talk about economic sustainability. So the programs that we put into place on our farms, while they may help our productivity, they need to be sustainable also, need to have a return, whether it's for us to continue our current generation or for future generations. I also want to highlight that freedom to operate. That's very important as we look at our policy and our public policy, and I'll share that with you in a little bit. Our investors have said be proactive in our approaches because we feel that freedom to operate is really key for us. Like I said, not just this generation, but the next generation. So when we talk about the work of NPPC, these are our 4 public policy areas. We work in animal health, we work in commerce and production, we work in energy and environment, and we also work in trade. To give you a little bit of an oversight of the pork industry at a high level, and this is based on 2023, our industry supported 573,000 jobs. We created $37 billion worth of personal income for our farms and created over $62 billion worth of value added, or GDP. So we're a significant industry. In the states that we have high pork production in, Iowa, Minnesota, so forth, the swine industry is one of those top livestock industries. So we really are a key driver in agriculture. Unfortunately, we've gone through some challenges over the last few years. On the left, you can see a chart that shows the estimated returns for a farrow to finish operation, and you'll notice that long stretch of red there. From middle of 22 to early 24, that 18-month period was our longest stretch of losing money since 1998. So if you look on the right side of the chart, you'll see the returns per head. And we're comparing April to July of 2023. Our farms lost on average of $32 a head. We had high feed cost, just kind of average market prices. If we move ahead to 2024, we made a little over $8 a head, which is better. Our feed costs came down, but our fixed cost, our insurance, labor, and so forth, that didn't really change much. So even though we've made money over this last summer, we still lost a lot of equity on our farms. And we're looking ahead to the fall months when we know we'll have higher production, and there's some concern again with some unprofitable times. So economics is really an important part of what drives our business, and not like any other business in agriculture. So let's talk about some of the key issues and opportunities for us in agriculture and the pork industry. To no surprise, we've heard it already a couple times today, right? The Farm Bill. We need to have a Farm Bill done. For us, the Farm Bill provides funding for our animal health, prevention, and preparedness. We call it the 3-legged stool. So it's funding for our National Animal Health Lab Network, the labs that do a lot of the testing. It's funding for the veterinary stockpiles, and it's also funding for a vaccine bank. So that animal health portion is really key in the Farm Bill. There's also dollars in the Farm Bill to help promote pork and export in international markets. So that's the Foreign Market Development Program, the Market Access Program. Those are key dollars that really help build pork around the world. And finally, we need the Farm Bill as a solution to California's Prop 12. And if you're not familiar with Prop 12, this is what Secretary Vilsack said about it. And I've heard him say it more than once. In fact, he said it again last week at our fly-in. He said, if we don't take this issue seriously, we're going to have chaos in the marketplace. So that chaos was caused by California saying to all the rest of the states, here's how you need to produce pork if you want to sell it in our state. So California, in a sense, is putting production standards relative to the sow housing on all the rest of the country. Now, it's okay if California wants to dictate production practices in its own state. That's common. Minnesota has production practices that I have to adhere to. But one state telling another what to do, that affects the interstate commerce. And then we don't just have California in Prop 12, we have Massachusetts and Question 3. And pretty soon we're going to have some chaos. But it's not just affecting us as farmers, it's affecting consumers also. And thank you to Dr. Seth Meyer and his office for putting together this information. So you can see that since Prop 12 was implemented in California, pork prices have gone up. On average, 20%. Now some cuts have gone up a little bit more. Pork loin has gone up 41%. In addition to increased prices of product, the availability has gone down about 20%. So that's a bad combination for a state that really likes pork. I mentioned that patchwork of regulations that we're really concerned about. Our pork goes all over, right? So if California has one set of rules and Massachusetts has another, and another state puts on a set of regulations, it gets hard for us as farmers to comply. And even if we complied with one state and another state puts on a regulation, then we're having to switch our operations again. So that's why we're really advocating and asking for that federal solution to Prop 12 in the Farm Bill. So let's talk about labor. Everybody's got a labor shortage. So I'm not telling you anything you don't already hear in agriculture. For us, the challenge is with our TN visas. These are 4-year educated individuals that come into a specialized position on our farms, typically as animal breeders. And the challenge is over the last 6 to 9 months, the number of acceptance of those TN visas has gone down significantly. Previously, we probably had 85% approval, and now that's pretty much just flipped. We're getting about 15% approval. So that really puts pressure on our farms to get those workers that they need for those skilled positions. H-2A visas don't really work for us in agriculture on the livestock side because our pigs, we've got production jobs that we need to do year-round, so we're not seasonal. So anything that we're asking for in terms of H-2A visas is reformed to make sure that could be a year-round visa. And finally, as you know, for those of you that are working in agriculture closer, our rural populations, they're shrinking, and our unemployment rate is below average. So we just don't have that pool of workers to pull from, which is why tools like H-2As, if reformed, and TN visas are very important to us. So let's talk about a bright spot for the pork industry, and that's exports. So in 2023, we exported $8.2 billion worth of pork products. That's about 25% of our pork production. And the good thing about that is that we are exporting cuts that we don't typically eat here in the United States. So those variety meats are going to countries that like those products. And what that does is that lifts the value of our carcass. So that increases the value about $64 a head. So when I showed you that chart that said we were losing money, think how much more the pork industry would have lost if we didn't have those exports. To grow our exports, though, we need free trade agreements. And you can look back on this chart to 2002, and if you follow the white line, those are the countries that we have a free trade agreement with. So those countries that we have a free trade agreement with, and there's 20 of them, we now export more pork to them than we do the rest of the countries we export to. So that's why continuing to open up markets and finding new markets is really key to the work we're doing. I want to touch a little bit on animal health. I mentioned we've got funding for it in the Farm Bill, and it's really to help continue the work we do on disease prevention and preparedness. So whether it's funding for our labs or funding for the Beagle Brigade, which is working with Customs and Border Patrol to make sure that we keep those diseases out, animal health and those programs continue to be an important part of what we do. It's also important to know that if we break with some type of foreign animal disease, our exports will shut down. So that $64, that 25% of our pork that I just referred to, that goes away, and that puts a serious strain on our industry. I'm really proud of the fact that over the last year, our producers led a task force that looked at mandatory traceability standards, and those standards were approved at our pork forum this past March. And you might ask, well, why do traceability standards, why does traceability matter to the pork industry? Well, it helps us as we look at managing a disease should we get one. So with traceability, we can know where the disease is and where it isn't. And that helps us as we try to control it, but it also helps us as we have those discussions with our trading partners, because we want them not to look at the US as a whole big US, but if we can show them that just one part of the country has a disease and the other doesn't, that's a faster resumption to those exports. The other thing traceability does is just help us come together as an industry and understand where our weaknesses might be and really help to protect the future of the pork industry. So I've talked about a lot of challenges that we have as the industry, but I want to talk about and leave you with a few opportunities that I think are available. First of all, pork is a wholesome, nutritious, affordable protein, and we need to capture demand both domestically and globally, and not be afraid to talk about the good aspects of pork. Second, I'm really proud of the grassroots efforts that we've had from our members and our producers over the last year. We've had many fly-ins where we've brought more producers into DC to talk about. I see more producers engaged at local, state, and national levels. And that's really important because each one of us producers has a different story and a different voice. And amplifying that message just makes us stronger. So we're small but mighty in our messaging. And finally, I'm really excited about the next generation. We have a group of young leaders that are passionate and they have a wealth of potential and they want to be involved with the pork industry. So we need to find ways to get them involved, whether it's in production or allied industry. And NPPC is going to bring forth some programs that this next year that I'm really excited about. So really capturing that next generation. So one final thought to leave you with. I get a chance to travel in this job, and I've heard a number of comments many times that people in agriculture are different. And as I've pondered about that, I believe that that's our ability to come together as a group, to focus on challenges and really create opportunities. And that's something that we really all need to be proud of. Thank you.
That's fine. Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Lori. Wonderful to get to know more about what you're working on and about you personally. I was delighted to hear all the activities that you had last week in Washington, D.C., including probably one of the most popular receptions on Capitol Hill, Bacon Fest. Can you imagine how much bacon you had to go through and how many people you had? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Bacon Fest has grown, and it is one of the premier events for the congressional team and their staff. So we are now in the Jefferson Building in the Library of Congress, and we didn't quite have 1,000 people there. 1,000 is our goal, but we had almost that amount. And bacon, all kinds of bacon, chocolate-covered, bacon in a cone. But really, it's our opportunity to interact and network, whether it's with the different congressional members or their staff. And really, we had about 140 producers in last week for our fly-in, which is about a record for us. About 35 of those individuals were first-time members to our fly-in, and for them to interact and tell their story, I mean, there was a lot of excitement and a lot of bacon there.
I bet. So this is the time for you to ask Lori some questions. As we talked about, use Slido, hashtag Ag Outlook, and we'll see them here on the screen and have a chance to pick her brain on some other things. I'm going to start out, let's drill down a little bit more into some of the information that you provided. So you're on Capitol Hill, and just showing that chart about income and losses that your industry has experienced in recent years. I mean, my goodness, I would think that you'd have a very compelling response from members of Congress, but how did it go? Can you give us any highlights of, your visits with certain members?
Yeah, the chart is compelling, and I would say that our members understand what we're going through, and overall, I would say we had favorable response to our asks, and we are asking for essentially the same thing that we asked for last spring, a passage of the Farm Bill. But I would say that there's a greater sense of urgency now, and as our members talked, as our industry farmers talked with their members, I would say there's probably some that were very positive in indicating something that could be done in a lame duck session. There was probably a few people that thought there might be an extension, but I would say overall that awareness was great, and overall I think our producers felt positive. I will say, and I think someone alluded to it earlier, I mean, we've got all of agriculture saying we need a farm bill. It's your job to do a farm bill. Please do one for us, because we are all facing some economic challenges.
Absolutely. One of the groups that I ran into when I was walking around the Hill last week was there were a group of women that had T-shirts that said "Moms Across America." And I don't know if you ran into them at all, but they are fighting tooth and nail your efforts to fix Prop 12.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to interact with them personally. I believe a couple members from Kentucky or one of our other states did talk to them a little bit, and just tried to explain, how Prop 12 was affecting us as producers. I don't know if they had success, but I know there was some interaction there. And I think, once again, that's a little bit of a misconception out there. I mean, once again, if one state wants to put in regulations for how production is managed in its state, that's fine. Our concern is one state dictating another.
One of our questionnaires has come in already, just asking if you could speak a little bit more about how the Farm Bill would fix Prop 12 in terms of making sure that we don't have this one state versus another state in a patchwork of solutions. You want to share a little bit more about what you hope to achieve by getting the Farm Bill passed with Prop 12 fixed legislation?
Yeah, so right now we have got language in the House version of the Farm Bill that would be a federal preemption to Prop 12. So basically looking at, Prop 12 going away. If you look at Senator Bozeman's framework that he's put out regarding the Farm Bill, he alludes to Prop 12, doesn't give as much specifics to it, but I would say a best case scenario for us as producers would be that Prop 12 it goes away, federal preemption for that inspected pork.
And one of the reasons I mentioned that lobbying organization in my previous question is because they're very much aligned with some of the animal rights groups. And even though they have a name that, is about motherhood and apple pie, it's been interesting to see the coalition of opposition that has emerged.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and I maybe have breezed over that too quickly. I think it's important for you to remember, especially if you're in a commodity group that doesn't have as much familiar with Prop 12. Prop 12 is not about animal welfare. It is being led by the animal activists. When They chose a number for the amount of square footage that a sow should have. It was a random number. They chose 24 square feet. Most of our sows have probably 18 to 20 feet now. There's no science that says 24 is better than 20. It was an arbitrary number, but it was strictly meant to continue to put more regulations on us as producers to hope to drive us out of business.
Yeah, it's always good to look behind the scenes, behind the curtain a little bit about who's funding different lobbying groups and try to understand their motivation. If you understand the opposition, then hopefully you can be better prepared, as you all are, in your lobbying efforts. We've got a lot of more questions that are coming in here. Thank you for those. One has to do with traceability, which you mentioned. We're in a different world now than we were several decades ago when my family raised hogs and, a small farrow to finish operation. You guys have a lot of different rules you have to follow. But is the traceability concept, is that pretty widely accepted now, or is there still some opposition to it? And if so, why?
Yeah, so let's talk about traceability in the swine industry. And I think it's important to know that on any given day we have roughly 1 million pigs on the road, whether they're going to market, whether they're going to other production systems. As our industry's progressed, we've moved from single-site production to multi-site production. So that's part of the reason why we're transporting pigs around. 10 years ago, when PEDV came in our industry and we saw it spread really fast, we didn't have the tools available that we do today with traceability to help us kind of contain that. When we went through this process, this task force, as a group, I will give immense amount of credit to Dr. Anna Forseth from our staff that led those efforts. We broke down into small groups, so we had packer processor group. We might have had a secondary market group. We had the show pig group. We had a small producer group. So each group had a chance to meet and bring forth their concerns with traceability and how their questions. And so when we went through that process, which was probably about a 10-month process, we talked through all the different scenarios. And so when it came time to vote on it at Forum, we did have a good alignment. And now the devil's still in the details, right? I mean, so it's not perfect. I'm not going to say we've got it all perfect, but we have a system in place now. We have time to work on it too, because we took those standards and we submitted them to USDA. So we've still got a couple years before they're finalized, and there may be some edits to that then. But I would say definitely we had everyone at the table if they wanted to be, and we had a chance to talk through those standards to really make sure that we were thinking of every aspect of our organization or our industry.
Thank you. You mentioned labor, and we do have widespread labor challenges throughout the agricultural community in so many sectors. One of our questioners wanted to know about if you could expand a little bit more on the TN situation. I know we talked about it a little bit last night. You used to have such high percentage of approvals, and now so much lower. So what's behind that? What's driving the change?
Yeah, why the change almost flipped in the TN approval rate? I would say there's a couple of factors at play here. Number one, historically over the last few years, we are using more TNs on our farms. And I think it's not well understood by the State Department how many TNs a farm does need. So the increased use in it. The number of offices, consulate offices in Mexico was also decreased from 9 down to 3. So there's probably a bit of an education process there as we look at the definition of an animal breeder and the approval there. I will also say that TNs are used by other industries too, auto and so forth. And I think in some cases we're getting caught up in some of the other industries' behaviors too. So, it's something that we've been working at multi-levels. We've met with the State Department. Another board member and myself met with the White House. We've had a letter from Representative Finstad last spring. So really trying to bring awareness and the right amount of pressure to the situation.
I'm sure that's so frustrating, just trying to get through all the red tape of.
Well, it is, and a large farm that might have 8 to 10 animal breeders or TNs. If they don't have 1 or 2 approved, I mean, it's significant. But some of our smaller farms where it might be themselves and another individual with as a TN, so they're just 2 workers. If that TN individual is not able to come back, not be able to be renewed, now you've cut your workforce in half. So it's being felt by producers really of all sizes.
So one of the buzzwords we hear a lot still is about sustainability. In some cases, we see incentives for sustainability sorts of practices. Can you talk to us just a little bit about how the pork industry is embracing more sustainable practices, if at all? And are there any premiums in the marketplace for making investments in certain types of practices or certain types of feed versus others?
Yeah, I would say sustainability happens on a couple of different levels. I mean, first of all, our production practices. So as we look at water usage and water meters and making sure we don't have wastage there, as we look at our nutrition programs and fine-tuning our diets to make sure that we're meeting our animals' needs without overfeeding nutrient ingredients. Those are all key. I would say even when we look at resources within our barns, whether it's electrical or lights, some of those type of changes that we can make. So there's those type of production practices. There's also a big effect for those producers that are crop producers to be able to take that manure from their pigs and then put it back on their crop ground and instead of buying synthetic fertilizer. I know for our farm, like I said, we're on 450 acres, 2,000 head. That savings to us last year was about $12,000. So we saved $12,000 by not having to buy synthetic fertilizer. So that all helps reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Are there programs available? I would say there's EQIP dollars and other type of dollars to, depending on your state and what's going on in your operation to be able to do that. Everybody's talking about the carbon credits and selling into that. I think that's something that a lot of us are still looking at. It's been referred to as the Wild West. And I think, that's an opportunity that we still need to have materialize a little bit better.
Yes, a lot of known unknowns there that we'll talk some more about. And then just a couple more questions for you before we go to break here. One of our questioners wanted you to comment the fact that you are seeing lower feed prices now. How does that impact your ability to be more profitable? And then I'm going to add a second question that came through the rotation here, and that is concerns going forward about the impact of some of the renewable energy projects that you're seeing. So
sure. Well, the lower feed costs have helped in our profitability. So that chart showed that by reducing the feed costs, it does help. So that added to some of that profitability that we saw in 24 versus 23. It's still a challenge that we have with our fixed costs, our insurance, our labor, and that have remained about the same. In terms of some of the renewable fuels programs and some of the things that we talked about as a group last night, I would say when I listen to producers, some concern in terms of that competition for corn. So if there's dollars and incentives that go to the renewable fuels industry that maybe pork producers aren't able to capture, is that pitting pork producer against renewable fuel? And is that, some might say that that's not a level playing field.
Well, I know that we're all looking to, build relationships and work together for the advancement of all of our industry. And I was excited, and this will be your last question here. You mentioned your Young Leaders program, and I think all of us across the industry are trying to find new ways to bring in educated advocates that can help us and people that are passionate about working in an industry that may not be as glorified as some others. Tell us just a little bit more about that program and how people can get involved.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about a new program that we have. It's called our Strategic Investment Program, our SIP Young Advocates Program. And this is for individuals from 18 to 22 years of age. So for a abbreviated membership, they are getting communications on the industry. They're getting all our weekly updates. They have a chance to travel to Washington, D.C. to see what happens there. and really offers them an opportunity to understand the pork industry on a number of different levels. So not just production, but the policy side of it. We kicked that off a bit at World Pork Expo. We had a Young Advocates discussion meet. Fascinating. I'm so impressed with the next generation. There was a number of individuals that were given challenging topics in the pork industry, and they discussed it, and then the winner was offered a cash incentive. So just a good program, really excited about the potential for individuals to learn more about the pork industry.
Well, thank you, Lori, for sharing so much of your insights today. We really appreciate it. We're going to take a break now until 10:35, but before I let you go, I'm going to do one long list here, and I'm happy it's a long list of our sponsors. So we want to thank our platinum sponsors, which include American Ag Credit, Farm Credit Services of America, and FCS Financial. Our gold sponsors include Bayer Crop Science, Brian Cave, Leighton Paisner, John Deere, Kansas and Missouri Corn, Kansas and Missouri Farm Bureau, National Crop Insurance Services, United Soybean Board, and USDA's Economic Research Service. Our silver sponsors include AdFarm, Dairy Farmers of America, Kansas Department of Agriculture, MFA, Pivot Bio, Spencer Fane, Stinson, and at the bronze level, Clean Fuels Alliance America, Corteva, Edge Dairy Farmer Cooperative, Farm Journal, Farmers National Company, K-State's Master of Agribusiness Program, Kansas Livestock Association, Kansas Soybean Livestock Marketing Association, Missouri Department of Agriculture, Missouri Soybeans, and the National Pork Producers Council, as well as the University of Missouri's College of Agriculture, Food, and Natural Resources. Let's give them all a big hand. Thank you. And thanks also to the Agricultural Business Council of Kansas City. Bob Peterson, Erica Venancio, and Zach Helder, could you please stand? Thank you. And also their officers, Ron Sieber with Kansas Grain and Feed and Renew Kansas, and Christy Larson with the DeBruce Foundation. So thanks to everybody. Go ahead, take a break. Don't forget about the discounted parking information, and we'll see you back here at 10:35.